trust your gut, says the person that doesn't have any gut issues, right? Nobody with IBS would be like, oh, let me trust my gut today.
Meet Kerry Conlon, a gut health expert, registered dietitian, and all-around food freedom advocate. With a master's in dietetics and over 6 years of experience, Kerry helps clients ditch food fears to feel good every single day. You might have seen her breaking down gut health myths on social media, where she keeps it real, relatable, and refreshingly honest. We had such a powerful conversation about the fascinating overlap between gut health and mental health. There's so much more connection than you'd ever think, and we're excited to unpack it.
But what I find absurd is like people are walking around with these gigantic blocks of Parmesan cheese and just biting directly out of the block like it's a protein bar. If you can eat sourdough bread, which is gluten containing, and you don't experience the same types of symptoms, you don't have a problem with gluten, you have a problem with fructans. Thank you for having me. As I mentioned earlier, I just find this whole topic to be so fascinating, and to have the opportunity to talk about it with you guys and to share what we have to say about it with people out there who might be interested is just really exciting. It's such a newer area of research and there's so much more to be done, but I think it's going to be over the course of time as more and more information becomes available about the connection between gut health and mental health. I think it's just going to become a really interesting way to look at managing maybe different types of mental health conditions in a way that we haven't considered managing them before.
Yeah,
Great.
I think a lot of people look at physical health and mental health really siloed, but they're so closely connected, and there's so much research and just stuff that shows the connection. So it's a great conversation to be having. I'd love to hear, in your words, how the gut and the brain communicate to each other and the impact of that.
Yeah, so it's really interesting, and I'm sure the way that I describe this is going to be only scratching the surface, but so our brain and our gut communicates bi-directionally. So what I mean by that is our brain sends signals to our gut. You may have heard the gut referred to as the second brain, and then our gut actually sends signals to our brain. So this is happening all the time, and it's actually really fascinating because the communication is happening not only through the vagus nerve, but it's happening by way of microorganisms in our gut, which is just crazy to me, just sending signals up to our brain. And then there's also hormones involved, immune modulators also involved in this communication. So it's a very complex communication network, but really interesting.
Yeah. So is that why when people say, oh, just go with your gut, is that because it's supposed to be your second brain?
Yes, actually, that is the origin behind that saying. Yeah.
Now, what about if someone has serious gut issues? Are you like, maybe don't go with
maybe
your
they shouldn't
gut
trust their
until we
gut.
heal it first, and then
It's
Let's
actually
do
funny.
it.
I saw a meme recently and it was like, trust your gut, says the person that doesn't have any gut issues, right? Nobody with IBS would be like, oh, let me trust my gut today.
let me just check in real quick.
Yeah.
And I guess it's the same, like, why you get butterflies in your stomach if you're nervous. Like, you see that connection all the time.
Angry when you're hungry, right?
The hangry, yeah.
Angry.
Yeah, absolutely. There's definitely, I feel like, examples of that happening all the time.
Yeah.
And we're not really aware of the connection when it's happening. But like I talk about it with my clients a lot, like that nervous stomach, when you get really nervous about something or you're anxious about something, you feel it in the gut and it could present in other symptoms that make you uncomfortable or like change in bowel habits as well. So that is a very strong example of that connection that's going on.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes complete sense.
In speaking about that, how are you seeing gut issues play out with mental health within your own practice as a dietitian?
In my practice, it's almost impossible to separate the two. There's a very strong connection between gut issues, in particular, if somebody has poor gut health or like a dysbiosis of microorganisms in the GI tract. And basically that refers to if you have a greater concentration of pathogenic bacteria compared to beneficial bacteria, it actually does affect the production of serotonin and dopamine. So a lot of people don't know that about 90 to 95% of serotonin is made in the gut.
Wow.
Most dopamine is made in the brain, but a small fraction
Yeah.
is produced in the gut. And so what studies are showing is that people who have a poor gut health or dysbiosis, a greater concentration of the pathogenic bacteria, actually have decreased production of serotonin. And that could be implicated in various mental health issues, mood disorders, higher rates of depressive symptoms, anxiety. So we're seeing that connection, and it's giving even more attention to the idea that gut health, yeah, we want to get it in order because
Yeah.
we don't want people to be uncomfortable, bloated, and having poor bowel habits and things of that nature, those physical symptoms, but it also really affects the mental piece, the emotional
Yeah.
piece, and the
Yeah.
overall quality
Yeah.
of life. So I'm seeing that becoming more and more pervasive in the literature, but also more on a more simple level. Just knowing my population of patients and how much they struggle with their symptoms, like their physical
Yeah.
symptoms, that really takes a huge toll on their mental and emotional health. People come to me and they're just like, they feel completely defeated, feeling like they're missing out on their social life. Their life is just passing them by because they
Yeah.
either don't engage socially or they feel anxious around food and social situations. So there's a huge overlap between
Yeah.
what I do in my practice and mental health. And so for that reason, it's almost impossible for me not to at least suggest to my patients that they see a mental health provider,
Yeah.
because really if they want that optimal physical and mental health, and that's both part of our overall health, right?
Yeah.
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 You really need to come at it from both directions.
Yeah.
I want to hone in on something you said there. Did you say 95%
Mm-hmm.
of
That's crazy.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
of dopamine or serotonin?
Serotonin.
Serotonin.
Yeah, serotonin.
Yeah.
It's like the chicken and the egg question. What came first? Did the mental health issues come first and then they caused some more gut imbalances? Or did the gut imbalances come first and then they cause maybe some anxious or depressive symptoms? Are you able to figure out which one comes first? Or at some point, are they all just so connected that they just have to be dealt with together?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And it's really hard to say. I think, typically when I do an intake with a patient, I'll try to ask certain questions to gauge prior to the onset of these symptoms.
Okay, yeah.
Did you experience any like traumatic life changes? What was going on in your life at that time, to get a sense? But it is really hard, and it's actually what makes it even harder is there's this like negative feedback loop going on here. So we have the brain and certain thoughts like anxiety and negative emotions and stress. It that gets sent to the gut, and then that could affect the distribution of bacteria in the gut, making more pathogenic bacteria be prevalent. And then that affects the production of serotonin and dopamine, which in turn affects the mood.
Yeah.
So it just keeps circling
Keeps
around,
going around.
in this
Yeah.
circle. So that's exactly why I feel like if patients really want to get to the bottom of their symptoms, at least in the long term,
Yeah.
we really need to look at it from both sides of
Yeah.
the form, because there's just this constant loop that's happening.
Yeah.
And we can maybe improve it from one direction, but we also need to improve it from the other to get that really great impact.
Yeah. Are people surprised when you ask questions about what's going on in their life or traumatic events? Like they come in to say, hey, I'm having these stomach issues, and then you start pressing for those things. Do you feel like people are surprised by that? Like they don't realize that connection is there?
Yes, I do think people are surprised by that, by the connection. I do think people are also surprised to have a provider that's not a mental health provider asking those questions, because I think sometimes, at least based on what some of my patients say, is that they feel like they go into a provider's office, they tell them their physical symptoms, and then it's let's deal with the physical, and there's not really any consideration for anything that could be going on beyond that.
Yeah.
So that's definitely surprising to a lot of the people that I work with, that I even take that time. And I also do take that time because I really want to tailor my recommendations and my interventions to the individual client. And so I really need to understand what their life is looking like to make a reasonable recommendation. And I always tell them, it might seem a little bit strange to you that I'm asking you what do you do for hobbies? What does your work look like? What does your family life look like?
Yeah.
But I need to know those things because I don't want to give you a recommendation or intervention that doesn't make sense for the life that you lead. And then you abandon it and then you feel like giving up.
Yeah.
So I do find that people are surprised by that, but they're all pleasantly surprised, I think.
Right.
Yeah.
They're probably relieved to feel like, okay, we're actually getting to the bottom of what's going on here. Not just here's a one size fits all treatment. It's no, I want to know you as a person. I want to know your lifestyle. I want to know your family. And then we can come up with something together. That has to be relieving to people.
I would say so. Even myself personally, like historically, I've always struggled with digestive problems in the past. And that's why I got into the work that I do.
Okay.
And I felt like that was what was really lacking in my care team at times is not really like everybody was so disconnected and focusing on one specific thing. And it's so much more than that one specific thing.
Right.
I'm a dietitian and I would focus predominantly on nutrition, but to not even consider that there's other possibilities at play here is you're not going to get the best outcome if you don't consider that there's so many different things that feed into people's physical health, their mental health, emotional health.
Yeah. I think a lot of people have the perception of working with a dietitian. They're like, oh, I'm going to go and I'm going to get advice on nutritional, how to change my diet, how to change certain things like that without even realizing that situations that they're in or that maybe they've experienced some type of trauma are influencing those factors of how the gut's forming the bacteria in there.
Yeah. And I don't think rarely this was news to me the last couple years. Like, really, is that really possible that these microorganisms are impacting? It was very obvious that, these microorganisms can be impacting, like, if you're bloated or if you have poor bowel habits, but that they could actually be affecting your cognition, your mental status, your emotional status. That is, when I first heard that, I thought that was like, almost bizarre, but extremely fascinating. But now we're starting to see like probiotics that are coming out that are starting to hit this topic of interest. Hey, you could take this probiotic formula and it could potentially help you with like your stress management. Whether or not that the efficacy of that, we don't know yet because it's such a new area of research, but these interventions are starting to be considered, which were never considered before. And I think it's only going to help not only myself as a digestive disease dietitian, but you guys too, probably as mental health providers.
It makes sense. Think about when you're bloated. It's hard to have a good day when you're super bloated, right? You're uncomfortable. It affects everything in your life. We were just laughing about this the other day because he's like, when you're bloated, you're a different person.
100%.
I swear you're a different person because I just wake up and I'm bloated today and he's, oh no. Oh no.
Get ready.
Okay. You sound just like my husband. Same thing. It's like my mood will be totally what's wrong, and I'm like, I'm bloated. He's enough said.
Exactly. And then once I go walk in my closet after that, he's like, oh no, please. Hopefully we have nothing important going on.
Yep. And that's, again, going back to that whole mental health thing. Like, that's a lot what I hear from a lot, especially women.
Yes.
Coming to me like these body image issues because they're bloated and they go out with their friends and they have to change their outfit 15 times to feel good in it or wear something that they don't really even want to wear because it conceals bloating. And that just makes them feel self-conscious. And then they go out into this social event and they're not fully present and enjoying it because they're just thinking in the back of their head about how uncomfortable they are. It's such a real
probably
thing.
Comparing themselves to other people. And that's why you said that cycle that comes in, right? Like it could start here. Like maybe something mental health related is causing issues that are causing bloating, right? But then bloating is causing them to go out and have self-esteem issues and then to have social issues. So it really is all wrapped up like that, but you can see that cycle that just continues.
Yeah, it perpetuates. It perpetuates and we have to figure out where that loop ends, right?
Yeah.
And that's going back to what I was saying before. That's where I really encourage people to not just see me, but to also see a therapist or somebody that can help them better navigate their emotions because I can give you all the foods that are going to boost your gut health, but sometimes there are factors outside of that are going to affect the way that you feel.
Yeah.
Going back to what I said before with the thoughts that we have, the emotions that we have, and how that could actually affect the way that we digest things, the way that the composition of our microbiome. It's it needs to be addressed in both directions.
Yeah. It's so fascinating. I'm curious how people know that they have gut health issues. Obviously, if someone is bloated a lot, they might put two and two together that this is not normal. But also, I feel like for women to talk about being bloated, like it is normal to an extent, or is it not supposed to be normal? Like, where is the line and how does someone know, okay, I probably am struggling with this now?
So the rule of thumb there, and this isn't going to be necessarily applicable to everybody, but in general, I tell my clients some bloat is normal. That's an indication that your digestive tract is doing its job. The bacteria in the gut, it's doing its job. But if it's associated with pain, altered bowel habits, if your stomach is so distended that you're having difficulty like zipping and buttoning your pants, those are indications that maybe we need to look into this a little bit more. But again, there is a difference between that and then people who get a little bit distended or bloated after a meal and they think, oh my gosh, there's something wrong with me. I need to get this looked at. Now, it never hurts to go ask a professional, hey, is this normal or is this not, right? If you are wondering if it's normal or you think it's abnormal, absolutely get an opinion. But I think that there's certain ideas, especially with social media, of what people should look like. And then people think, if I don't look like that, is there something wrong with me? That my stomach's bloated sometimes or that it's not completely flat. So that's the difference there. But also too, if those symptoms are coinciding with other things that aren't so physical, that could also be an indicator that your gut health is out of whack. And some of those things is a pretty long laundry list, but some things that I look for, are you having skin issues? So are you having like rashes or acne that just came out of nowhere, brain fog, low energy, high fatigue, low levels of motivation. Maybe your stress tolerance is becoming lower and you're starting to find yourself not being able to navigate certain situations in a calm fashion in the way that you used to before. Increased irritability, headaches, joint pain, sleeplessness or poor sleep is another indicator. So there's a lot of different things that can really be indicative of it's probably time to just see if your gut health is at stake here, because a lot of these things that a lot of people are dealing with on a daily basis that they start to normalize and think, oh, I have no energy. I just work too much.
This is normal, right? Everyone complains about being tired, right? This is normal.
I know you're going down the list and I'm just like, check. But we have young kids at home.
That's certainly going to justify. But there's a lot of symptoms out there. I even have people come to me like that they have celiac disease, for example, and they don't have the normal symptoms of like any digestive stuff. So they don't think it's really a big issue. But then we dig a little bit deeper and they're telling me that they have joint pain, that they have brain fog, that they have low energy. So again, just an indicator that the gut health can be manifesting in ways in which you don't normally think that they would.
On the topic of gluten, because we know that is a very hot topic right now, and we did go through some of your reels, so we know that you're not the biggest fan of just cutting gluten out when you're bloated. What is this new thing of everyone having gluten intolerance or feeling like they can't digest bread? Where is that coming from? Is that true? Do people have gluten intolerance if they don't have celiac? Can you debunk some of that for us?
Yeah, gluten. People really love to demonize gluten. And there's absolutely certain circumstances where gluten needs to be avoided or limited, particularly in celiac disease. We definitely do not want to be consuming gluten or being exposed to gluten if you have celiac disease. And there are instances where people are gluten intolerant. But what I have actually found in my practice is oftentimes people think that they have gluten intolerance. And what I actually find in testing that out, because I do have a very specific way that we can figure out if that is indeed the problem, is oftentimes it's not celiac, it's actually fructans. And fructans, it's basically a component of wheat. And how I can test this out with people is if you can eat sourdough bread, which is gluten containing, and you don't experience the same types of symptoms, you don't have a problem with gluten. You have a problem with fructans because
I'm so happy you brought up sourdough.
yeah, I love sourdough.
Cassie loves sourdough.
Because I was having the issue where if I ate too much gluten, I was very uncomfortable. So I'm like, you know what? Let me try the sourdough thing out. Like everyone's saying it's all the rave. I make it at home. I swear I could eat half a loaf. Not that I should, but I could eat half a loaf and I'm totally fine. But then I eat like half a bagel from a bagel shop and I'm uncomfortable. So I'm wondering if it's quality, but I guess you're saying it's something completely different.
That sounds to me like you have more of a fructan problem, and fructans are a type of, if you've ever heard of the low FODMAP diet, that's one of the test groups that we work through to see if somebody has a problem with fructans. And that's one of the main ways to test it is, okay, if you eat a regular piece of bread and you feel bloated, but then you go and have sourdough and feel completely fine.
Yeah.
They both have gluten in it, and you're having a very different reaction. So it's not the gluten, it's something else. And that something else is usually the fructan, because when you make sourdough, the process of it helps degrade the fructan, so it's more easily digested. So fructans are going to be in both types of bread, but they're in sourdough at a much lower amount than regular types of bread. Yeah.
Oh, you didn't know you were coming here today to diagnose.
Yeah, I have so many people that come to me and it's like, I gave up gluten and I still don't feel good. And I mean, it's become the very first thing that people try to do on their own to figure out, which is fine. That's completely fine.
Yeah.
A lot of doctors love to just tell patients, just cut gluten out.
Yeah.
And I understand giving that a go, but my fear with that is sometimes people try to figure things out on their own for a little bit too long, and then all this time is passing you by and you're uncomfortable. Whereas if you had dug a little bit deeper with a professional, we may have come to a solution much more quickly and saved your quality of life for this past 6 to 12 months.
Yeah, because really every body is different. And there's a lot of people on social media are just giving general advice, and it's not always correct for everyone.
So how do you know, let's say you are on social media and you come across an influencer and they say something like cut out gluten or only eat, like I think what I saw yesterday, it was a 30-day raw carrot diet. And I'm like, okay, interesting. It wasn't all they said to eat. It was to incorporate like a raw carrot salad every single day for 30 days. But my initial
It's
thought
funny
was
that
like,
you saw that, because I saw something that said that they were like poisonous.
oh yeah, they're like not really orange. So they're like someone
like in the 1800s, they were never
like
orange.
genetically modified them and they're not supposed to be orange. There's so much nonsense out there, right? So how do we as consumers know that is useful dietary information and that is safe to incorporate into my life and that I should probably watch out for?
Wow, that's a really good question. And I feel like it's a really important one to be asking because we're just constantly bombarded with all this crazy stuff on social media.
Yeah.
The first thing that I recommend is, number one, ask yourself, what are the credentials of the person that's giving this information? Okay.
Yeah.
Is it a registered dietitian? There's a difference between a registered dietitian and a nutritionist. There's actually no guidelines to someone calling themselves a nutritionist. So you can call yourself a nutritionist.
I did not know that.
Legally, you can.
Wow.
Legally, you can. And you don't need any education. You don't need anything. Now, in order to call yourself a registered dietitian, you have to have a master's of science in dietetics. You have to do 1,200 hours minimum of supervised practice. You have to pass a national board exam, and you have to do continuing education. So
you're being held to a certain standard by a board who's watching over you practice.
Exactly. So that's number one, is ask yourself, what are the credentials of this person? Is it a registered dietitian? Is it a physician? The second thing is, ask yourself, does this person have interests in demonizing certain things? Because a lot of times what we see on social media is demonization of a certain thing, and then suddenly they're selling you the solution.
Oh.
So
they're selling you some sort of course or, I don't know,
supplement or whatever it is. So be skeptical of that.
Yeah.
Also, generally speaking, very strong language against something a lot of things, or I would argue most things when it comes to nutrition, are completely dose dependent. So
Right.
at a normal consumption dose, they're not going to really pose too substantial of harm. And of course, if you have an excessive intake of truly anything, there's
Yeah.
always a risk of something. So that's another thing too, is this really extremist language is usually an
Right.
indicator that maybe we need to be a bit skeptical about the information that's being presented to us.
That makes sense. So if someone's saying, hey, do this every single day for this amount of time, you might think, okay, that might be a little extreme. Maybe something like that every single day is probably not going to be the best course of action.
Yeah, exactly. Or cut this out completely. If you eat even a tablespoon of this, you're going to drop dead or you're going to get cancer and something ridiculous like that. Yeah, those are the things to be cautious about. And if you are walking away from social media with a lot of questions and a lot of conflicting information, which a lot of my clients come to me and the first thing that they say to me is, I tried to research on my own and I just got really confused because this person says this and this person says that.
So overwhelming.
It is overwhelming. And if you feel that way, look for somebody that can help you sift through all that information, because at the end of the day, a lot of times what you're hearing too is good information, good pieces of information, they're conflicting. And it doesn't mean that one is right and one is wrong. It might mean that one of those things might be better for you than the other, because you are an individual and you have your own individual needs and health conditions and considerations, life considerations. So finding the thing that works best for you is what's important, not what worked best for Sally and Henry on Instagram.
Like, that's such a key to it, right? Because you do have people who are giving these kind of blanket things, whether it's always do this or never do this, but they don't know you, right? They don't know that you're not going to have a reaction to some sort of food, or that your body's not going to respond a certain way, or even people doing some sort of crash diet or really intense workout. If that's something that your body's not used to, you can have a really big reaction to it.
Yeah. And I've definitely seen some harm be done by people not going to certain extremes and taking information at face value, thinking because it worked for this person and they look like or they feel like the person that I want to look or feel like. And it didn't end up working out the way that they had hoped.
Of course.
So it's always important to think about the fact that what works for somebody else is not necessarily what's going to be what works for you.
Yeah.
For somebody who might be listening that is in that place on social media where they're getting conflicting advice and maybe they never even thought to work with a dietitian, can you give them a little bit of an idea of what it's like to get started with you?
Yeah, as far as getting started with me, I keep it as easy as possible, because I know it can be a bit challenging to reach out to a provider and not know what to expect. Really, for me, I try to offload all of the question marks for the patient or the client. So usually letting them know that, number one, I do take insurance. I really truly believe in accessibility when it comes to healthcare.
Yeah, that's big.
Huge.
That's
huge. It was the foundation of my business. I never even really considered running a practice without taking insurance, just because personally, as somebody who struggled with digestive problems, when I was going through the process of trying to figure out what was going on with me, I added up all the money that I spent and it was like, it was insane. And so I don't want finances to be a barrier for someone to getting help. But as far as actually, like, once they're onboarded and working with me, I look at it as we're building a relationship in a way.
Yeah.
Most people are not coming to me for one session, one and done.
Right.
They're not being rushed out the door in 15 minutes. I reserve at least an hour for every single appointment that I have with people, because I want to know as much as someone is willing and able to share about how they're feeling, what their life looks like, so that I can fully understand what's going on. Because I think if I don't have all the details, I can't give you the most tailored recommendation to interventions. And at the end of the day, I'm here to make you feel better.
Yeah.
The more information that I have, the better I'm going to guide you and help you get to where you need to be.
Yeah.
I'm sure some of your sessions might sound like therapy sessions.
Yeah, seriously.
100%. 100. Sometimes I think I should go back to school and become a therapist because
You could do both.
there's definitely, and it's funny. It's when bartenders say, oh, I feel like a therapist
Yes.
sometimes.
Yes,
Like a lot of people, I see people very long term, months, 6 months, 12 months. I have some clients that have been seeing me for 3 years. I have people
Yeah.
that come back after a few years with a different problem.
Yeah.
And I start to learn their families, their social lives, what their work looks like. And
Yeah.
sometimes they do come and they are venting to me about their job but that's important for me to know because
Right.
as we know that those feelings of stress and those emotions are driving the symptoms physically that they're struggling with.
Yeah. What role does testing play in your work with clients? Or
So I typically in and of myself, like I don't do a ton of testing. There's a lot of tests floating out there that I'm not saying are not useful, but they're not evidence-based yet. And I don't know if you've ever heard of like the GI map or the Dutch test. Those are 2 tests that are used in the alternative, I guess you would say alternative medicine world, or possibly even a lot of dietitians use it. And there's nothing wrong with it per se, but the research behind it right now is lacking. And because of that, insurance does not pay for it. So again, going back to that accessibility, I'm not going to order a $500 test for somebody that science doesn't yet support. Of course, if they insisted on it, yes, absolutely. But I'm not going to make it sound like we need this in order to get you feeling the way that you want to feel. So I do coordinate oftentimes with gastroenterologists, and sometimes people will come to me first before having seen a GI doctor. And I will, when it comes to GI, there's certain symptoms that we can try to navigate with nutrition. But do I think everybody should be evaluated by GI? Yeah, I do. Especially now with knowing the prevalence of colon cancer is increasing in people that are just 30 years old. Not trying to scare anybody by any means, but I want to make sure that I'm doing my due diligence as a clinician to make sure that everything else is being ruled out here. And also, the more information that I have from testing, again, going back to the better that I can help you and guide you from a nutritional standpoint, because the intervention for IBS is most likely going to be different than the intervention for Crohn's disease or GERD. So it's going to be different. So knowing that certain things are there or not there can really help me help them.
Yeah. So do they go to their GI doctor and they get blood work done and then they can get a diagnosis that way? Is that how that works? Or you're looking for certain markers?
So usually the doctors are doing comprehensive blood work, which is helpful. It can help guide what needs to come next. But I do think a lot of people usually end up needing some type of imaging or scoping to really figure out what's going on. And I know nobody wants to get a colonoscopy. Nobody wants to do that.
On anyone's list. But hey, if you're comfortable with your symptoms now, you'll do anything, right? To just feel better.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, if you want fast relief, I know getting a colonoscopy doesn't feel like the fastest path to get that relief, but it can be if there's something going on that we're unaware of, and that's going to affect the way that we intervene. Another thing too, like I recommend all my clients and anybody listening, when you get your blood work, I always recommend asking for a C-reactive protein. It's not on your standard panel. It's usually an add-on, but it's really helpful because it's an inflammation marker. And it could tell us a lot about what might be going on with you on the insides and things that you might not see. High levels of inflammation can definitely impact your gut health and consequently can affect your mental health as well. So I think that's like something that I know when we go to the doctor, we get our metabolic panel and our CBC, but I think the standard should be a C-reactive protein for everybody, because there's actually research to show that's a better indicator of heart health and cardiovascular risk than getting a cholesterol reading.
Oh, interesting. And
very interesting.
it's so interesting that's not on the panel already that you had to ask for that specifically when it seems like it's so beneficial to know.
It's so beneficial to know.
Yeah.
And I've had people that came to me with an IBS diagnosis, right? And then they went and got blood work done and they had high C-reactive protein. And that's an indicator of inflammation. So we want to look a little bit
Yeah.
deeper here. Do you have an inflammatory bowel instead of IBS? Because that's two completely different things. One is
Right.
autoimmune and one is not. And we want to treat those very differently. I do recommend people get that even if you have no digestive problems, like just in general,
Why not?
just
Yeah.
to know.
Right? If you're
Yeah.
gonna know. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So can you explain what exactly inflammation of the gut is? What does it look like? What is that? What does that mean?
Yeah. So basically, when we have inflammation in the gut, that can stem from different factors. So it could
Mhm.
stem from like an infection, it could stem from just like dysbiosis, it could stem
Mhm.
from an autoimmune condition. But basically,
Okay.
what that means is if there's inflammation, your immune system is being activated in some way. Your
Okay.
immune system is perceiving some sort of threat and it's releasing inflammatory markers to
Okay.
address what that threat is. So one such thing is like they release when when you have inflammation, there's cytokines, which are immune
Mhm.
modulators that are released. And what's really fascinating about the cytokines is actually they can travel up to the brain through the vagus nerve and actually affect the areas of the brain involved in like mood regulation. So like the prefrontal
Wow.
cortex, for example, and
Wow.
affect your mental and emotional health. So again, going back to that
Yeah.
connection between the brain and the gut, that's another way in
Right.
which gut inflammation can affect your mental
Mhm.
health and emotional health.
Which makes sense because if your body is perceiving there's a threat, there's something wrong, then obviously it's going to want you to react to that. It's sending that signal of, hey, something's wrong here. You need to be in fight or flight mode, or
Mm.
you need to conserve your energy, or whatever that's going to be. Because I think back to like when you're sick, you have a cold, right? And so your body's trying to fight that. What are you doing? You're resting. You're taking care of yourself. You're not feeling 100%. Yeah, it makes total sense that if your body is fighting something or thinks it's fighting something, that you're going to have that reaction.
Yeah, and it's actually interesting that you mention the fight or flight because I talk about this with my clients all the time. How is that implicated here with the whole gut health and how
Yeah.
you're feeling physically? And so when we're in fight or flight, our body is basically perceiving a massive threat and it's going to
Yeah.
Right.
basically divert blood flow to
Mhm.
what the body perceives to be vital organs. So that your brain, your heart, your body doesn't think your GI tract is a vital organ. So that blood
Mhm.
flow goes to those other organs, less blood flow goes to the
Oh,
gut, and then
Okay.
that affects digestion. It could slow things down. So that's another way
interesting.
by which stress
Yeah.
is it's very much involved
Right.
in how people are feeling physically. So
Yeah.
again, that's why I recommend people really think about what their stress levels actually look like
Yeah.
and be honest with themselves about that because that can certainly be affecting how they're feeling
Yeah.
physically.
Is that why it is easier to go to the bathroom when you are relaxed and in your own environment?
Yes,
Yeah.
is it like stage fright people say
Yeah.
like they feel like if they have to go to the bathroom in an area or an environment that's not their own,
Yes.
there's definitely a higher level of stress and that can
Yeah.
certainly affect the ability to have a productive bathroom experience.
I always laugh post vacation. Everyone's just in the bathroom. As soon as you get home, you're like, you're home and you're relaxed. It's a little bit different.
Yeah, that's a huge piece. The stress
Yeah.
and vacation is actually one of the biggest things that I talk about with a lot of my clients because I think that's when everyone feels like their digestion is completely out of whack.
It's
And
probably
for
actually a
various
big
reasons.
trigger, I'm sure, right? For the people that you work with who have bad anxiety around what they consume because they don't want to feel bloated. They don't want to have those symptoms, but then they're out of their own
In
environment
this new
for
environment, right?
that has to be a really big trigger for people.
It definitely is. It's a huge trigger. And that's one thing that I work with people if like they're telling me they're going on a trip or something, like how can we prepare for this a little bit? Of
Yeah.
course, like the stress component, that's where they do need that support of mental health, but there's other tools in the toolbox that we can help like
Yeah.
maybe mediate the physical symptoms so that you don't
Mhm.
become more stressed on the trip
Yeah.
and then that stress doesn't feed into increase of symptoms. But travel is definitely hard. And I do find my clients that travel a lot, especially for work, definitely struggle the most, I would say.
Yeah. Yeah. We heard something recently. I'm curious if you know if this is true or not, but that when you travel, what was it? You consume different
You
bacteria
introduce new
from different
bacteria
places.
into your
So it's good to travel because you'll have a stronger gut. Have you ever heard that?
So I haven't heard that specifically, but thinking it through, it makes a lot of sense. When we're
Yeah.
exposed to different environments or we're exposed to different people, it's like when you have kids, right? Like to some extent, you want them to be exposed to different environments
Right.
and it helps them build immunity.
Yeah.
It could, I would say too, if you think about it from the perspective of if you're traveling to different places, you're eating
Mhm.
different types of foods,
Yeah.
diversifying your nutritional intake,
Mhm.
which certainly can, assuming you're eating things that are more on the minimally processed side most of the time,
Mhm.
that can certainly help with the diversity of the gut
Yeah.
bacteria. So thinking about it in that way, I would see how that could make
Yeah.
sense.
It's like another reason to travel, right?
Yeah, for my gut health.
Yeah.
Right, for my gut health.
Now, what about when you are traveling somewhere where you're nervous about let's say you're going to another country and you're worried about either like the sanitation of food or just how they're storing it or just a place where you know, okay, people go there and they tend to get sick a lot. Do you work with clients to prepare for that? Do you have any advice for that?
Yeah, that is definitely, there's only so many things that we can control,
Yeah.
right? And obviously we can make smart choices. One of the biggest things is there's planning ahead, taking a look at the menu
Mhm.
before you go out to a restaurant if it's available online can be
Yeah.
really helpful, or
Mhm.
making a phone call to the establishment asking them how do you prepare certain things.
Mm.
And that's some things that I help my clients with. If they tell me they're going on vacation and they have specific reservations at different places, like I will
Mhm.
go do a menu review with them and help them
Oh, that's
figure out
awesome.
like what
Yeah.
are some things that you
Right.
can eat that are
Yeah.
tasty, because obviously we want them to enjoy their food too. That's a huge
Right.
component of my practice, is finding that joy in food again.
Right.
So helping them navigate the menu so that they can make choices that they'll enjoy
Mhm.
from a taste standpoint, but
Mhm.
also that won't make them feel anxious. And I do feel like
Yeah.
that helps them when they have like my eyes taking a look at the menu for
Mhm.
them and giving them a couple choices.
Yeah.
That stress around the meal definitely decreases.
Yeah.
And I think that can just really affect the outcome, right? Because now they're
Yeah.
not as stressed, they're enjoying it.
Yeah.
And they're not having that dynamic of their digestion being upset because they're
Yeah.
stressed. And it's actually funny too, because I have some people that, going back to the whole stress idea, people when they're completely relaxed on vacation. Like I had
Yeah.
somebody just last week tell me that they were on vacation and they were so relaxed and they ate like everything under the sun. They just didn't even care anymore. They were just like,
Yeah.
I didn't even care. I just wanted to enjoy it. And they were like, I had no problems. I had no
So
digestive
Oh, that's
upset. And I'm like,
very
fascinating.
see,
interesting.
that
We
is the
experienced
stress.
that. Do you remember? So this is back before this might have even been before the sourdough. You might not be happy about it, but I cut gluten out and I was like, I can't do it. I'm not going to eat gluten. And we went to DC for the weekend to celebrate his sister and our now brother-in-law who were getting married. It was like just a little bachelorette trip, and they're the best people in the world. And I was so excited to be with them. We were so happy, and we planned this whole tasting menu. It was like the menu of their love, like where they met. Okay, this restaurant symbolizes that. We went to all these
Oh, that's
places.
so
And I
nice.
was
That's really
like,
fun.
I am not going to restrict myself. And I remember I ate a lobster roll and I was so nervous about it. And I was like, I wasn't sick at all. I ate all this food. I wasn't sick. Everything was great. I
Mhm.
woke up the next morning feeling awesome. So that's such an interesting point that you made,
Mhm.
because I remember coming home and being like, I swear, if I was at home and I ate that meal, I
Yeah,
would be sick
it
to my
would've been
stomach.
different,
So
yeah.
that there must be something to that, which is so fascinating.
It absolutely is. And when someone comes to me and they tell me they went on vacation and they ate whatever they wanted and they didn't think twice
Yeah.
about it because they just didn't care about the repercussions, and they come home and tell me everything was fine,
Yeah.
that is glaring evidence to me
Mhm.
that your stress or your mental and emotional
Yeah.
state is one of the primary drivers behind your physical
100%.
symptoms.
Yes. Yeah, it was actually eye-opening because I was like, okay, maybe we could start being a little bit less restrictive, because look, I had this situation and it was fine. So I feel like if you can show clients, hey, you can be in this situation and you can feel a little out of control, whatever that looks like for you, but you can still be okay, it's probably so freeing for that.
It definitely builds a lot of confidence.
Yeah.
So they start to, it's almost like dipping your toes in the water
Mhm.
and being like, let go of the control a little bit and
Mhm.
everything was fine.
Yeah.
Okay, so how can we push that a little bit further?
Yeah.
And I think that eventually it gets to the point where each exposure and each good experience just makes them feel more and more comfortable. And
Yeah.
that really allows for that enhanced quality of life.
Mhm.
And that's ultimately what my goal is with everybody
Yeah.
is I don't want somebody to feel like for the rest of their life, they can't eat a million different things in order to maintain that physical
Right.
wellness. We need to find that balance. And
Yeah.
even some of my clients, and this is probably something that's going to be a little bit strange for you to hear that a dietitian would say this. And I always preface this with my clients is like, we'll do different types of interventions and we'll determine what certain triggers are, what certain foods are actually like triggering your symptoms versus not
Yeah.
triggering your symptoms. Sometimes I'll say to them, go ahead and eat the trigger. And they're just looking at me like, are you crazy? And
No,
I'm
you
like,
don't know what's gonna happen. I do.
and it's basically, of course, if they're not comfortable with it, I'm not going
Yeah.
to make them do it. But
Yeah.
my point in that is I look at it like once we identify that you have a certain trigger, dietary trigger, when you choose to eat it again, and there's different reasons why people eat certain things, right? Like for
Yeah.
some people, it's I just want to live in the moment, and I know that I'm going to feel really uncomfortable later after I eat this, but my experience right now is more important than my experience later. And I encourage people, if they're having that like battle with themselves, go for it because now
Yeah.
you are empowered. Like you're making that educated decision.
Right.
Before you would have these symptoms and you would be like, I have no idea why I feel this way. I'm so frustrated. I don't know what it is that I ate that made me feel this way. And I'm like, now, if you feel
Right.
comfortable tonight when you get home from dinner, you know exactly why.
Yeah.
And in a way, that's empowering because you
Yeah.
now have control rather
Yep.
than
Yeah.
the digestive problem having control over
Yeah.
you. That doesn't mean that you're going to avoid these foods for the rest of your life at all
Right.
times, but it means that you're now going to be in the driver's seat as to whether or not you're going to eat it. And if you have the symptoms, you know why. And then you have the tools in your toolbox that you've learned by working with me, how you can get that flare under control before it spirals into something that starts to bleed into your life for days and days.
Yep.
But that's one thing I think people catch me off guard because I'm like, oh, garlic, go eat the garlic or go eat the pasta, even though they know. And I'm like, you know, we have to find that balance of enjoying your life and
Right.
also feeling good physically.
Yeah.
And sometimes even myself, I know if I have a giant bowl of pasta with garlic and broccoli, I'm probably going to pay for it later. But
Yeah.
sometimes I'm just like, I don't even care. I want to just enjoy this dinner
Right.
like everybody else right now.
Yeah.
Right.
And
you
that goes
know?
back to some of these feelings are just normal, right? I would imagine that most people, if they go out and they eat a bunch of fried food, right, they're not going to feel great the next day, right? There's certain things that you just know, okay, maybe you don't have to be diagnosed with a specific issue, but most people are not going to feel okay after they eat that way. And again, it doesn't mean you should never eat that way. It's just going into it knowing, hey, maybe this is a normal reaction to that, and that's okay.
Yeah, exactly. Too much of anything is going to make you feel uncomfortable.
Even raw carrots.
I can't even imagine in what world that would be a recommended diet.
Oh
Are
my
you
like
sure
goodness.
that wasn't from a carrot company?
It probably was from a carrot company. Oh, wait.
again,
we-
going back to those interests.
We have to bring up because we saw you make a reel about Parmesan cheese, and I needed to know about this because we recently, first of all, we love Parmesan cheese.
Love
and
it. Yeah.
recently I was like, oh, it's low fat, it's high protein, this is great. And then we saw your reel and we were dying
And we get the
laughing.
Costco block of
So we could
cheese.
do it,
Yeah.
but I want you to explain what this Parmesan cheese trend is and why it's absurd.
Oh my gosh. So it's very simple. People are using Parmesan cheese as a way to get extra protein, which is not wrong. There's nothing wrong with that. By no means. Please. Similar to the cottage cheese thing. People are
We're
having
obsessed with cottage cheese.
obsessed with cottage cheese, which is fine. But what I find absurd is like people are walking around with these gigantic blocks of Parmesan cheese and just biting directly out of the block like it's a protein bar.
That is
And
so
I'm just
bad.
like, this is just there has to be like there is a better way to get your protein
Probably a
than,
lot of
Yeah,
better
right.
ways.
than that. And I'm not going to scold anybody who truly enjoys that and they feel like they're benefiting from it. But again, going back to the language behind some of these recommendations from these influencers, it's just very extreme and very
Yeah.
one-sided and very focused. And people start to believe, oh, the best way for me to get my extra protein in
Yeah.
today is by eating a block of Parmesan cheese. Now, maybe for some people it could be, but again, the nuance that what might be good for that person might not be good for
Yeah.
you. And certainly I was coming from the lens of digestion and I was like, this would certainly not be something I would recommend for anybody
Yeah.
struggling with bloating or digestive upset, which I would say most people do have those symptoms.
Yes.
There's a lot of salt in
That too.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes. And I know, so dairy can be a big trigger for
Right.
people in general with digestive issues, right?
Mhm.
So how do you go about that? 'Cause obviously, you are not a fan of totally cutting food groups out, which I think is amazing. Is it just limiting it? Is it once you deal with the other symptoms, then you can digest dairy better? Is it the quality of dairy?
That's a great question. So going back to that whole dose dependency thing that I was
Mhm.
talking about before, it's very much dose dependent. And that's one thing that I work on with my clients is, okay, we have certain dietary triggers,
Mhm.
but there's usually a threshold at which you can eat this and not have any problems.
Oh.
We test that out to try to figure out what amount of dairy is good enough for
Right.
you to
Okay.
not be
Yeah.
symptomatic. And then there's also different lactose loads in different types of dairy products. So
Mhm.
if you go and you have a hard cheese, you're going to have less lactose than you are if you go and drink a glass of milk. And that's why a
Okay.
lot of people say, it's so strange. I could eat cheese and crackers, but then I go and I have a glass of milk or I go have ice cream and I feel
Yeah.
terrible. There's a very big difference between the lactose burden in those foods. So that's another thing to consider.
Yeah.
Fortunately, nowadays there's digestive enzymes like exogenous ones on the market
Mhm.
that you can take to help if you are going to
Okay.
be intaking these things, so that you don't have to feel like you have to avoid them altogether.
Right.
So again, the dairy is just like gluten. It's very much
Yeah.
demonized and it's not necessary to feel like you have to avoid it completely in order
Yeah.
to be healthy or to feel your best.
And we also know from your Instagram that you're not the biggest fan of raw milk.
Yeah.
So can you talk a little bit about that? Because that is another thing that I think that you see online a lot. And there's a lot of people who are huge fans of it, huge advocates for it. Same
Mhm.
thing with the raw cheese. And then obviously people on the other side that are like, no, you shouldn't be consuming that. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so raw milk, that's a tough one. And I'm not saying that nobody should ever drink it,
Mhm.
but the source is super important. And
Yeah.
I think that not many people have access to a credible source of raw milk.
Okay.
And there's also always that risk of foodborne illness. So for me personally, the risk of the foodborne illness that can come from consuming
Yeah.
raw milk far outweighs any
benefit.
perceived benefits. And I say perceived benefits because, again, the research isn't there yet
Yeah.
to support strongly the benefits of raw milk.
Mhm.
Not saying that it couldn't potentially be there in the future,
Yeah.
Right.
but
right.
right now it's not there.
Mhm.
So that's just a personal decision that
Right.
I make for myself. Would I scrutinize somebody else for making the decision to
Mhm.
consume raw milk? Absolutely not. At
Yeah.
the end of the day, you can do what you feel is best for
Mhm.
you. But again, going on that flip side, a lot of people on the social media platforms are almost making people feel that if they don't consume raw milk, then they're making a poor choice for themselves.
Right.
And
Right.
that's the type of thing that I have issues with.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, because it is very interesting. Like we've talked about before, that the source of things makes such a big difference. So maybe you have someone on social media who maybe they live on a farm and they have their own dairy cows
Mhm.
and they can consume raw milk and they can know the source and everything like that. But then you have someone else who maybe lives in a suburban area or a city who doesn't have that same access, but then they suddenly feel like, oh, but the milk that I'm getting at Trader Joe's can't compete with the milk that they're getting. Well, probably not, because you don't live on a dairy farm.
Yeah.
So that makes sense, right? So you have to do what's best for your lifestyle.
Mm. And I think going back to to the accessibility, right? Raw milk is definitely going to be more expensive
Mhm.
than getting milk
Right.
that's pasteurized. We have to think about socioeconomic status. It's not for everybody. And
Mhm.
to make people feel like if they're getting regular old milk at the grocery store that they're being negligent of their
Mhm.
health
Mhm.
that's not fair. And that's again, I can't stand that my way is better than your way
Mhm.
attitude, and we just see that so much on social
Mhm.
media.
Yeah. When you tie in the gut health and the mental health together, I'm wondering how much of that influence you have to undo in those early sessions, because I can't imagine how many conversations you have to have with people where you're just educating them on
Right.
that, because a lot of people don't even realize that they are being sold something, whether it's a physical product or it's an idea or it's a mindset. And you probably have to do so much work to just undo some of that and give some education on what these things mean and where your beliefs came from, and that you even have such strong beliefs on food.
Yeah, I will say I have found that usually people who are taking the step to meet with a professional and to meet with me are open to what I have to
Mhm.
say. Otherwise, they wouldn't
Yeah.
be there. So I
Yeah.
don't feel like it's a huge challenge
Mhm.
to help them sift through this information.
Yeah.
I don't really experience a ton of resistance,
Mhm.
people that are established in their beliefs and not willing to
Yeah.
flex. I feel like
Mhm.
most of those people are not coming to
Yeah.
me, period. Like they
Yeah.
have their beliefs and
Right.
they're established, and there's really nothing that I can do to change
Mhm.
that. I feel like most people, they'll bring something up to me and they'll say, I
Mhm.
saw this or I saw that. Like, what are your thoughts?
Yeah.
And
Mhm.
I'll give them my thoughts based
Mhm.
on the evidence that's out there and the science that's out there.
Yeah.
But of course, I never express myself with any
Mhm.
sense of judgment. And at the end of the day, even if I provide the education and they choose to consume something, even though I said that it probably wasn't my recommendation, or they
Mhm.
choose to avoid something, even though I said you don't have to avoid it,
Yeah.
at the end of the day, they're okay. It's okay for them to make that
Yeah.
decision for
Right.
themselves. And I'm not, and it, I'm not gonna, it's not gonna affect our working relationship by any
Yeah.
means. So fortunately, I haven't felt that way so far. I have felt like, you know, sometimes I do feel defeated by the social media like context and just
Mhm.
feel, oh my gosh, how can I possibly continue to battle like the misinformation out
Mhm.
there?
Right.
But for the sake of my mental health, I have just stepped away from engaging
Mhm.
in any type of like challenges on social media.
Yeah.
So if people post some really crazy things, I historically would go in the comments and start pushing back a little bit. I don't do that anymore
Yeah.
because people have their beliefs and
Mhm.
people will push their narrative, and that's okay.
Yeah.
And so I just feel like it's not a productive conversation at
Yeah.
this point.
Yeah. And a lot of times that's not the place where they're looking to have a productive
Right.
conversation. So maybe to
Mhm.
your point, by the time that they are talking to you, they've already decided, okay, I need extra help. I need someone who knows what they're talking about to step into my world and to help me figure this out versus talking to someone online who maybe they are set in their beliefs and they don't want to change it and they're good with that, whether it's true or not.
Yeah, I definitely agree. If people are looking for that extra layer of
Hmm.
support and they're looking for, or they're open to the idea
Hmm.
that their perspective might be challenged,
Yeah.
then they're going to see a registered dietitian to get
Yep.
that information.
Yeah. Yeah. So where do people find registered dietitians? Obviously, we would love everyone to work with you, right? But if someone is from a different state, or how does that work? Or can you see people from different states?
So we can and we can't. So right now it's entirely dependent on licensure in each state, but
Okay.
because the world of dietetics is relatively, I don't even want to say new, but
Mhm.
the whole licensure thing is strange because some states like don't have any licensure at all.
Mhm.
So in those
Okay.
states we can practice.
That's so
That
interesting.
is interesting. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Because I do think we're a little bit behind, honestly,
Okay.
in valuing the role of nutrition and how much it can
That's
really
true.
impact
Yeah.
our health. Um, so we are a bit behind.
Hmm.
So there are some states that still don't have licensure, and that's a huge challenge because again,
Yeah.
that allows for self-proclaimed nutritionists
Hmm.
to be giving advice to people, not just on the
Hmm.
internet, but in one-to-one consultations that
Right.
are
Go around
very
with,
can be
yeah.
harmful. So there are states that have none. So
Mhm.
in some regards, it's helpful that they have no licensure because then
Yeah.
there's no barrier for me to see somebody from that state.
Hmm.
But there are other states that do have licensure, and in those cases, and New Jersey is actually in the process of this, you cannot provide individualized
Hmm.
nutrition counseling unless you are a registered dietitian, or you can be fined for it.
Yeah. So even if you say, what if you say you're like a food coach? Can you do one-on-one meetings with people, or is it pretty strict?
Here's the thing. So the definition of what's acceptable under a licensure state is, so it's medical nutrition therapy. So
Hmm.
essentially what licensure does is protects that. So that's
Okay.
the idea that you are giving nutrition advice to help somebody manage
Hmm.
their some type of condition, some type of
Okay.
health. I find it very difficult to try to make it sound like, because some people will say, I'm just doing coaching. And I'm like, yeah, but
Yeah.
they're coming to you and they're telling you they have
They have
hypertension
medical
or they have
problems,
heart
right?
disease or they have to lose weight for a different reason or they
Right.
have digestive problems. In my opinion, you can't spin that as not being medical
Right.
nutrition therapy
Right.
because it is
Yeah.
there's medical implications regardless.
Yeah.
In those circumstances, yeah, I guess there is some gray area, but
Mhm.
people still need to tread a little bit lightly because
Yeah.
depending on if they're reported and
Mhm.
what they're doing,
Yeah.
it can certainly have legal
Yeah.
ramifications.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
That makes sense. Look for a registered dietitian. And if you're in a specific state where it's required that you're licensed in that state, then they have to find that. Are there directories online that people can go to that you can easily find them?
Yeah, so I don't know if you guys are familiar with Health Profs, but that's a
Mhm.
really good platform to really find any
Okay.
healthcare provider. You can
Okay.
put in a search and say dietitian, or even if you put nutritionist in there, it's fine because Health Profs won't allow a nutritionist just to be on there.
Okay. So they'll
Y-
be
They
validating
screen
credentials.
you
Yeah, you need to
Okay.
have credentials, and then yeah, you could put in like whatever your need is, and they'll
Mhm.
give you healthcare
Mhm.
providers local
Oh,
to your area, which
Yeah.
amazing.
is really great.
Yeah.
Instagram, again, looking at their credentials. Sometimes some dietitians don't put it right in their profile on
Mhm.
Instagram, so you might have to go to their website and find
Okay.
out. There's like other providers that you
Mhm.
might be seeing currently for other reasons, whether it be
Mhm.
Yeah.
doctors, mental health specialists.
Mhm.
Those are great ways to find them. Just Googling like
Yeah.
dietitian in my area for whatever condition. And also, too, I do find like even if you call, say you Google search like registered dietitian in my
Mhm.
area, and then you call this person and they don't really work with what you need support with,
Mhm.
at least most of the dietitians I know, we're so well connected that I will always refer somebody out to another
Okay.
provider
Okay.
if I
Yeah.
don't
Right.
think I'm the best fit, because at the
Yep.
end of the day, I want them to feel better. It's not about me.
Mhm.
So I will tell them, hey, someone comes to me
Mhm.
for diabetes. Um, can I help them? Sure. But there are definitely other dietitians out there
Right.
that are
Yeah.
much more qualified than I am to help them with that.
Yep.
Mhm.
So if that's their primary concern,
Right.
then I'm going to refer them to those experts for that
Yeah.
primary
That's
concern.
such a good idea
Yeah.
to go to any registered dietitian and say, hey, can you help
Yeah,
me? This
right.
is what I'm looking for. Can you guide me to the right person?
Hmm.
How can people figure out what the different specialties are? Would it just be reading someone's website? Let's say someone's listening to this and they need someone specifically for gut issues. How can you know what provider specializes in what?
Yeah, so I would hope that most providers would make it pretty clear on any type of
Okay.
marketing
Yeah.
or any type of website that they have. I do see a lot of dietitians that are the jack of all trades, and
Mhm.
I have certain feelings about that. I just
Yeah.
truly believe just knowing how robust
Mhm.
the nutrition world is
Mhm.
and the
Right.
research out there for nutrition, I might offend somebody by saying this, but I truly don't believe you can be an expert in every area. Again, I think it's important to really hone in on what you are the expert in and really just become
Mhm.
that strong source of support for that particular area
Yeah.
and do your due diligence and refer out to the other providers
Mhm.
that specialize in those other areas.
Yeah.
So typically, like me personally, I feel like I try to make it extremely clear on my website and
Mhm.
any type of directories I'm on, social media, what I do, so that people aren't wasting their time calling me. But if for some reason it isn't clear to somebody and they do call me, again, I will always let them know
Yeah.
I'm not the best fit. And I
Mhm.
certainly have somebody I can recommend because, again, I'm an advocate for nutrition. I'm an advocate for my colleagues, and
Mhm.
I want my colleagues that are skilled in certain
Mhm.
areas to be the sounding board for clients that need help in that
Yeah.
Yeah.
area.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, what areas specifically do you specialize in? And if somebody's listening and needs help in one of those areas, how do they get in touch with you?
So I do all things gut health. I work with a lot of pretty much every digestive disease and disorder that you can think of.
Mhm.
I would say a majority of my clients have IBS.
Okay.
Now, more so because I do think IBS is over diagnosed.
Mhm.
A lot of times people self diagnose as
Mhm.
IBS, or their primary care doctor will diagnose based off of symptoms.
Okay.
And so I think that's for those reasons. That's the only reason why I see mostly IBS. It's not because I choose to only see IBS. It's
Mhm.
just that's what most people have. But I'll do inflammatory bowel diseases, diverticulitis, GERD, pancreatic deficiency, so many different things. So anything GI, really, I work alongside I collaborate with a lot of local gastroenterologists as well. So before that reason, I do see a lot of different conditions because fortunately, more and more gastroenterologists are becoming aware of the massive impact that nutrition has on these patients that struggle with these diagnoses. So they are referring out. And going back to what you were saying before about how do we know where to find a dietitian? I'm glad you asked that question because in the beginning of my practice about 5 years ago, I was like approaching GI doctors and saying, this is who I am, this is what I do. And a lot of them said, I didn't know that dietitians like specialize in certain areas and I'd never know where to find you guys. So I'm so glad that you came my way. So again, going back to there's a lag for sure in the healthcare world as to the power of nutrition, but I think we're starting to catch up with that and seeing that providers really understanding that this needs to be addressed alongside the medicine piece.
It just seems to me like, duh.
For us, yes, but and of course, my biased mind would be like, how could you possibly? Someone has Crohn's disease, or any GI condition really, where nutrient deficiencies are so prevalent, and to not even think that they should probably see a registered dietitian. But again, a lot of doctors, especially some that have been in practice for like many decades, they don't really know what registered dietitians do. And I have a really great relationship with my primary care doctor. And he was like, oh, I thought that dietitians like just made the sandwiches in the kitchen at the hospital. And so he was very open to the education. I'm so like intrigued to find out what you guys do. And oh my God, like the impact that you have, I never would have known. And really that mindset stems from historically a dietitian. It was basically like home economics. So we've evolved as a field and it's much more science-based than it ever was before. So again, I think in the next 1 to 2 decades, or even before that, hopefully more and more healthcare providers will see the utility of dietitians and start making those referrals and those connections.
So what is your website? What's your social media handles? How do people find you specifically?
Yeah, so I'm on Instagram, Good Gut Nutritionist, and my website is goodgutnutritionist.com. And you could also do a Google search, Kerry Conlon, and you'll find me on Google as well. So you can reach out to me in any of those channels. And if you need help with anything, I'd be happy to support you. Very huge chance that I take your medical insurance. So most people pay $0, $0 to see me and get the help that they need.
There's no risk.
There's no risk. There's absolutely no risk. Just an hour of your time. And even if not even that, because if in 15 minutes you just decide you want out, then we can end the appointment. That's fine.
And now if you can leave people with one just good tactic that they can use of what can help make them feel better, what is one thing that they can walk away with that they can implement today?
Okay, so I would definitely say, just to keep it super simple, so one of the foundations of my practice is the 3-2-1 method. This is for gut health, just general gut health. The idea behind that is every one day, so that's where the one comes from, you should consume 3 different colored vegetables and 2 different colored fruits in every one day. So 3-2-1. And the reason for this is because when we have a variety of colors in the diets, we have, generally speaking, greater diet diversity. And the more diverse our diet is, the better our gut health is going to be. So that's just like a small action step. One thing too is if you aren't consuming like anywhere near that right now with fruits and vegetables, then take where you are now and add 1 additional serving of fruit or vegetable per day.
I love that.
And just start there. That's a really good small action step to do. And then you could build up from there.
I love that. That makes so much sense.
This was really great.
Thank you so much for having me. It was awesome.
Thank you so much for being here.
Pleasure.